Okay, folks, our mystery guest is no longer a mystery. There are some long-time Met fans in attendance tonight. Sarah Langs is a lifelong Met fan, but her life does not extend back to 1969. But she, like every good Met fan, knows the story. A team that was nothing but a ragamuffin bunch of lovable losers, and then from out of nowhere, won 100 games, won the National League pennant, took on the heavily favored Baltimore Orioles in the World Series, lost the first game, then won the next 4. It's still one of the most miraculous seasons in baseball history, one that will never be forgotten around these parts. And a big part of it was Ron Swoboda.
Bob, I thought you were going to ask me how long am I going to keep trying to make a living off of one catch? Well, the answer is, how long have I got? And I live in New Orleans. We just took over the national lead in per capita murders, so you probably did me a little favor bringing me up here for 3 days, Phil. I appreciate that. You can't buy that time back, you know. But look, it's just such a wonderful thing, and Phil, you know, when he said it was ALS and I had to come, and honestly, at my age, I'm a 78-year-old, 6-time grandfather, and it staggers me when I think that I'm about 4 years older than Casey Stengel was when he managed me as a 75-year-old in 1965, and I walk in, and here's this guy looked like they peeled him off of Mount Rushmore. He was the oldest person I ever saw in a baseball uniform, and I'm like 19 years old the first time I met him. And I thought he was like this legend, you know, in the flesh, and I'm hanging on every word. And of course, there were a lot of words, but Stengelese was his thing. He had had all those great seasons with the Yankees and won pennants and World Series through the late 40s and 50s, and he really took a chance on tarnishing his legend by taking the Mets job. But the Yankees had fired him for being 70 years old. They made it pretty clear that 70 years old, you can't be managing a big league team. So when Casey took the Mets job, one of the things he said, he walked up to the microphone and he said, "The Yankees fired me for being 70. He says, but I'm here to tell you, I'm not going to make that mistake again." So I got to hang around this guy, and he was special on a level, because he could go back 50 years and he'd be telling you about some outfielder that learned to do this because he worked on it this way, and it was like parables, and you could improve yourself if you listened to him. And some of the guys that, you know, had been there with the Mets since 1962 when it started, and they lost 120 games. It is still the benchmark of baseball futility, 120 losses in 162 games. And I don't want anybody to ever break that record. I think it belongs there with the 62 Mets. They earned it, it's theirs. Never go away. It's one of those records. It's like DiMaggio's 56 game in the other way, Pete Rose's incredible career with the base hits. But I just felt like, you know, you're going to have a chance to be around this guy as a rookie in 1965. You're not ready for the big leagues. They kept us there. There were 4 of us rookies. Tug McGraw, we'll talk about him a little bit later. Jim Bethke and another guy that played the outfield, and Danny Napoleon. And those 2 guys didn't play. Tug went on and had a great career. But they kept us in the big leagues to protect us back before the draft. That kept you, another team from drafting you, because the Mets had lost Paul Blair by that mechanism the year before, and all he turned into was one of the top 2 or 3 center fielders ever to play the game. He was originally a Met. So they were hanging on to us, and 1965, we open up at Shea Stadium. It's jammed. The Dodgers are in town. Don Drysdale's pitching. And I've done nothing in spring training. I mean, I'm just there. But I have a uniform, and I have a pretty good seat. And that's right where I wanted to keep it. So about the 7th inning, we're behind in the game, no kidding. And I see Casey looking around. It looks like he's looking for a pinch hitter, and I'm like trying to get skinny. I'm trying to slide back. And he had a funny way with names. He knew who you were, but he might not get your name exactly right. Now, my name is Swoboda. It means literally freedom in Polish. Swoboda means freedom in Ukrainian. And I always took a lot of pride in that. But to Casey, I was Swoboda. And I hear him with his voice. He says, "Swoboda, get a bat." And you're like, get a bat? I'm not ready for Don Drysdale. I just played 1 year in the minor leagues. We never saw any Don Drysdales. But you have to look like this is cool. And so you get up and your heart's going like, and you go to the bat rack and you get your helmet on, you walk out on deck and you're trying to get loose. And you're like, can these people see me shaking? And I walk up to home plate and you're like, you don't have any clue what's going to be coming at you. And he gets me out, first pitch fastball that I have yet to see. And I'm told by an umpire that it's a strike. So I take his word for it. Now I'm going to try to get a hack up there. The next pitch is another fastball, and I swing at it, and I'm about a half a second too late. So I'm thinking, well, the good news here is it doesn't look like this is going to take very long. So for some reason, he throws me this slider, and of all his pitches, the slider was just kind of polite, and you could actually see it. And I hit a line drive to second base. I'm behind the slider, and I hit it to second base, Jimmy Lefevre. That's when the Dodgers had that total switch-hitting infield. Jimmy Lefevre's the second baseman. I hit a line drive to him. I'm out. It was the best out I ever made in Major League Baseball. I hit a line drive off of Don Drysdale, opening day, 1965. I make that right turn, and I sit down, and that was the best game I ever, because it's like that's all I had to do. So things start to roll a little bit, and Casey's getting me into ball games, and I hit a couple of home runs, and I hit one off of Farrell, first name. Yeah. Turk Farrell. The reason is, I'm standing up here at 70 years old talking about a whole lot of people that aren't here anymore. But Turk Farrell could throw pretty hard. I hit one over the back wall at Shea Stadium. That's the longest home run I ever hit. And a guy came up to me after the game, and he wanted to give me the baseball. And I said, that can't be the baseball. And I stole this line from Babe Ruth, who was also a Baltimorean. He told a guy one time who came up to him after a game with a home run, he said, that can't be the ball. He said, the guy said, why? He said, you couldn't have got back this fast. And I didn't take the ball. It was the stupidest thing I ever did, but at that point in time. But in my rookie year, it was not the stupidest thing I did in my rookie year. Casey gave me a chance to play. I had no idea what I was doing. We're in St. Louis, and we actually have a chance to beat the Cardinals in 1965. Now, I told you the Mets lost 120 games in 1962. We're going to lose. We're losing 100 in 1965 as well. Okay, and so I'm in the outfield, and we have a chance to win this game. Larry Bernarth is going to save the game. The bases are loaded, 2 outs. It's rained on and off, and and the tarp has been on and off, and it's cloudy, but the sun starts to come up right behind the stands, and Del Maxville, this little weak-hitting shortstop, hits this line drive out my way, and I don't have the sunglasses on, and the thing goes in the sun, it goes by me. 3 runs score, they tie the ball game up, and I'm the dummy out in right field who didn't have his shades on, all right? So I'm livid, all right? I've ruined a major league game. I'm lucky to even be there, and I'm ruining the Mets' chance to win a major league game, okay? I go in, I hit a pop-up out to right field, I'm out. Those helmets back then were made out of fiberglass, and somehow I flip mine down on the step, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just, the horses, the emotional horses, are running away with the stagecoach, and I start to head into the outfield, and I see that helmet laying there on the step, and I'm going to punish it, right? So I decide I'm going to stomp it, and I stomped that old fiberglass helmet through the open end, and it kind of cracked open a little, and it catches on my foot. Now my foot's stuck in the helmet. So I'm trying to shake it off. I'm doing this dance at the top step, and it's not coming off. And Casey has seen this whole thing. And Casey at that time had, Casey would have these accidents occasionally. He had his hand in a cast, right? So he comes bounding up the steps like he's 25 years old, and he grabs me by the shirt, and he says some bad words that I'm not going to say. But the gist of it was, he said, "Kid, when you missed that fly ball," he said, "I didn't run in the clubhouse and throw your watch on the floor. So I don't want you busting up this team's equipment because you popped out to right field." And he pulled me out of the game. And I thought, here I am in my rookie year. I don't know what I'm doing, and I just screwed up my entire career. And the clubhouse was right behind there. And I went down in there, sitting there all by myself. And you know the line from A League of Their Own, there's no crying in baseball? Well, there was there. I was by myself, and I didn't have, they came. But it's because I cared. And we're playing the Cardinals, of course, and you can't think about the Cardinals without Bob Gibson. And if there's ever a question about who was the pitcher you hated to face, it was Gibson. Gibson, look, you think about it. In 1968, Bob Gibson had an ERA of 1.12 and lost 9 games. How? So Major League Baseball lowers the mound to give us hitters a chance, and the next year Gibson has an ERA of 2.18 or something and loses 14 games. How does this happen? I wouldn't even be speaking to the team if I was Bob Gibson. This guy was the most aggressive, seemingly angry guy I ever faced on the mound. And he didn't want you to hit a foul ball. There's a story about him one time. Tony Taylor, who played back then, pretty good player with the Phillies, went up to home plate, and he made a little sign of the cross, and he walked into the batter's box, and Gibson's out on the mound, and Gibson makes a sign of the cross and goes, "What are you going to do now?" He did not want you to even hit a foul ball, and he was in a hurry to do it. We didn't need to put a pitch clock. They're going to put a pitch clock into Major League Baseball. They didn't need to put a pitch clock there for Bob Gibson. He could shut us out in 2 hours. It was no problem. And we, in fact, one time when Wes Westrom took over for Casey Stengel, he had a plan for Gibson. We were gonna call timeout, go back, get pine tar, do something, change a bat, do something, just keep stalling because Gibson was on the mound. He was on the mound like a guy. He looked like a guy who was double parked with a gallon of ice cream in his trunk. I mean, he was in a hurry, and we stalled him for 30 minutes. It took him 2.5 hours to shut us out. That was the net gain from it. But the beautiful thing about being, the player, that I was able to play with such a wonderful bunch of people. And in that rookie season, our first base coach was Larry Berra's pop. Yogi Berra was our first base coach. And there was, we always tell, there's a million, and Yogi didn't say all of these. Frank Slocum was a writer, and he wrote a bunch of them, and Joe Garagiola made a pretty good living telling Yogi Berra stories, some of which he actually said. Like if you don't go to your friends' funerals, they won't go to yours. Stuff like that. Well, we were playing in Crosley Field. Crosley Field in Cincinnati is, the first major league ballpark ever to have lights. But we're playing there, and it was only about 380 feet to center field. It was a close fence, and they had about a 10-foot high cinder block wall, and then above it was a wooden hitting eye, so you didn't get the headlights from the expressway that was out there. And above that yellow line was a home run. Well, with the bases loaded against a guy named John Saturas, I hit one out there. I didn't hit it great, but I hit it good enough. And it comes down off that wood, lands right at the base of the wall. Veda Pinson gives it the center fielder gives it an underhand flip. Art Shamsky, who he and I, ironically enough, on that 69 team, we platooned in right field at the end of that season, and that worked out pretty good. But anyway, I think I've hit a home run, but the umpire out there is signaling safe. I end up with a single and an RBI. We score one run. We lose the game by a lot more than that, so that wasn't a play that beat us. We had plenty of ways to lose the ball game. But what I lost was a grand slam home run. I only hit 2 of them in my career, and that would have been 3, and I didn't get that one. And Yogi, who didn't do a lot of bellyache, and he's livid, and he runs out to the umpire, and he starts barking away and gets the heave-ho, and you never saw that happen. So after the game, we run into the clubhouse, and it's a little, bless you. We go in the clubhouse, and of course after the ball game, the writers all come up to Yogi's locker and they say, "Yogi, what'd you say to get the thumb?" And as only Yogi could say, he said, "All I told them was, if you couldn't hear that ball hit the wood, you're blind." And I heard him say that. So, he was beautiful. No, he was beautiful. Yogi was always Yogi. He was Yogi. He couldn't help us 240 lifetime hitters, but he was there in '69 when we were lucky enough to take it down the road and win a World Series. And I got to tell you, as a kid that grew up in Baltimore, we're playing the Baltimore Orioles. And it meant so much more to me. And I had let a ball get over my head for a home run on the first batter of the thing down in Memorial Stadium, a ball I thought I should have caught. And so I had worked pretty hard on being a little better outfielder than conventional wisdom had me at, okay? And so I thought I had gotten a lot better, and I let one get away because I was so nervous in that first game. And they had a lot of left-handed pitchers, so I got to play. So here we are in this is game 4. The tying runs on third. The go-ahead runs on first in Boog Powell, and Brooks Robinson hits this line drive, and I go bowling away after it and catch it on my backhand, and I slide and I come up and throw, and it turns into a rather elaborate sacrifice fly by Brooks Robinson. Frank Robinson scores easily, but it does keep the go-ahead run from scoring because we didn't score in the bottom of the 9th. We didn't win it until the bottom of the 10th. But I'm going to tell you, every once in a while, when, in that late night, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and you can't go back to sleep when you're my age, you think about what would have happened if that thing got up the gap and they scored and you ruined it, and you let the Orioles back in a series where you had your foot on their neck. And I just, it makes me feel like even after all the work I put into it, ironically enough, being at this event tonight, and of course, having heard that wonderful speech by Lou Gehrig, where he said he was the luckiest man in the world, I feel like looking back on my career, given all the things that could have happened and what did happen, I feel like a pretty lucky person too, and I'm married to an amazing woman for, this will be 58 years. She was a speech pathologist, and you notice how careful I am to enunciate that, because she was very good at what she did, and I don't want anybody thinking, you know, if I can't pronounce it, it's like she didn't do you a lot of good. Plus, she worked with, you know, like head injuries and strokes as they affect your speech capabilities. And I think it helped our marriage work a lot longer because she did understand the damaged brain that she was stuck with. And her sense of humor has kept us going for all these years. But I've been very fortunate, you know, and I played with Tug McGraw. And I'll give you, to close this thing, Tug was the beautiful guy. He was all heart and all drive and as sincere a soul as you're ever going to meet. Now, I'm not saying you needed to be married to him. That could be a little problematic because his big heart embraced a lot of folks. But he was a beautiful man, and you know, he had three of the greatest lines that I can think of. Somebody asked him one time, you know, he was with us for the 69 World Series, went over to the Phillies and closed out the 80 World Series, the first World Series that team won in their long and storied career of being. And somebody said, "What'd you do with your World Series money?" And Tug said, well, he said, I spent most of it on whiskey and women, and the rest of it I just frittered away. And somebody said, well, what did you rather play on, real grass or AstroTurf? And he said, I don't know, I never smoked any AstroTurf. And he was talking to a reporter one time, and he said, you know, the first time I had sex, it was pretty scary. And the reporter went, scary? Why? He said, well, it was dark, and I was alone. So, Tug, I'm stealing his lines, but bless his soul. I always cared how things were going with him. But anyway, like you gotta believe, and it was him. He believed, and we need more people like him. We need, you know, that the way you could sit in the furthest away seat, and you knew what was going through Tug's mind when he was out there trying to save a ball game that didn't seem to work for him until he got a couple guys on base. I mean, he was amazing. He had some escapes that were, you know, pure magic, you know. But anyway. Let's, if we have any questions, anybody, you know, if I covered everything, go ahead.
What bothered you most about the game today, from when you played, the players, the game itself, the players? What bothered you the most about what happened?
What bothers me the most about today's game is, and I have MLB extra innings. I guess I could watch a lot of games. I really just watch the Mets and who they play. But, no. Well, if we took a poll in this room, like Met fans, Yankee fans, I'm glad I played for the Yankees for 2.5 years. That's all I can tell you. No, look, it's a very different game. The money blows your mind, you know, and I think the money is like so many other things today. It's like a distraction. These guys, you know, I'm a Bucky Showalter fan. I feel like he's got a bunch of people that go out and act like they want to play every day. And I see more of that than I see people who look like the money's in their head. I see more of that. I see less of players that look like the money's actually affecting them. I mean, the money probably affects me more than anybody else. I mean, when they were going through that, that episode with Correa, and they're talking about $300 million over 10 or 12 years, and you're like, okay, I could figure out what to do with that. And it goes round and around, and the Mets go ask the same doctor in San Francisco that created the problem for him in San Francisco, and the deal goes nowhere because the Mets are probably trying to, knock years off it, and then he ends up going back to Minnesota, who pay him a princely ransom to go back to that team. I want to tell you, when I hit 280 one year in 1967, all right? And we didn't have agents back then. I went into Johnny Murphy, former left-handed pitcher for the Yankees, among others, and he was the general manager of the Mets. And I was making like $14,000. And I had just hit 280. And I went in there thinking, I got a little bit of a case to make here. So we were back and forth and whatever, and we get the number up to 28,000. And I say to Johnny Murphy, if you rounded it off to 30, I could take that $2,000 and get a halfway decent apartment instead of this crappy place I'm living in now with my lovely wife. And he bought it, okay? It wasn't a crappy place, but it seemed like something to say. But I had agreed to a $30,000. I walked in there making 14. I walked out making 30. $30,000, okay? That's what Scherzer tips the clubhouse guy. I get to my car and you realize I've got to live from January until we open up the regular season before I'm going to see a nickel of this money. And I'm thinking, something's going to happen to me, and my hands are shaking on the steering wheel. And, that happened. So, it's unrealistic for me to even try to imagine the kind of dollars that they're making today. I don't have a big problem with the game. I got a bigger problem with Rob Manfred, making the bases bigger, take the strike zone. You going to take the strike zone away from major league umpires? No. And you're going to make everybody play where they need to play. You're telling me big league hitters can't learn to hit the ball the other way if they overshift? You're going to tell them where they can't play? That bothers me more than anything. I mean, it sort of convinces me that somebody up there in his office, he might like being commissioner of baseball, but I'm not sure he likes baseball. And that's just the way I feel. But I want the game to unite people. I feel like today we've had so much come at us, and our sources of information are scattered here and there, and a lot of unvetted information. I want baseball to unite people and everybody care about it, because these guys still are the best in the world. And I'm still dead honestly interested in what's going to come of all of Steve Cohen's money this coming season. He spent a few bucks, but let's see what it looks like on the hoof and on the field. So I'm anxious about that. But probably the money more. That's a long answer, but the money more than anything, because it affects the way we look at them more than the way they look at us. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Well, when you watch any contest on television now, any basketball or football game, and you see 8,000 commercials for sports betting. How many different companies? You can bet on anything you want. You can bet on whether, you know, the center's going to get sick and have, throw up. No, I mean, the world has changed. Pete was probably his own worst enemy. But when we played Pete Rose as a player, you couldn't take your eyes off of him. It was like Aaron and Mays and McCovey and Marichal and Koufax and those guys. You watched everything they did. You couldn't take your eyes off it. If you get 200 hits a year for 20 years, which nobody's going to do, you're just close. Pete is the hits leader, and I think they ought to figure. Maybe what they ought to have is you know, they could build another wing up there in Cooperstown. We were up there this year when they inducted Gil Hodges, and I'm going to tell you, I was as happy a person as I've been in a long time that happened, because I wasn't sure the process could embrace a guy who had a few years taken off his playing career because of World War II, where he went in the Marines and was on some very ugly places like Iwo Jima. And he lost, obviously, a lot of years as a manager because his untimely passing. But somehow they couldn't add the two things together. And to me, and the kind of character he was. They've kept people out of the Hall of Fame because they were bad actors. What about rewarding somebody who's a good actor, who's done these other things? When he got voted in, that was a beautiful thing. And you know, I had my problems with Gil Hodges because I was stupid and immature. And, you know, all he wanted you to do was make yourself the best player you could, go out there and help this team win, and act like an adult. I could do some of it some of the time, but not all of it all the time. And I did have a little bit of an authoritarian problem, and that was on me 100%. But I'll tell you what. It was a great and correct thing that happened. It's like, you know, it was a wonderful time to be there. It was a warm thing for all of us who helped campaign a little bit that it did happen. Yes. Anybody else? We good? Thank you all. Thank you very much. I just want to say another thing. I've said it to this man's face, and you know, Phil Cuzzy, he's amazing. Phil is amazing, and Bob Costas in this fractious world we're in has always been a man able to step up, and when something needed to be said that he had researched and he had good reason to take tough positions, he steps up and he does it. And you always have to listen to his reasoning. And I've always respected that, and I'm always glad to be in your company. You bet.
Thank you very much.